Good morning, everyone. This is John with Gun.Deals, and today we are talking about the Holosun 507 Comp, and as the name implies, it has a singular focus in mind. Biggest, most forgiving window that you can fit into an RMR footprint. But before we get into basics, go ahead and target focus on that like button and let me know what you think of the widescreen red dot in the comments down below. Full disclosure on the HS507 comp is that I have no relationship with Holosun, and I bought this dot with my own money. Now, speaking of money, the MSRP is a little bit over $400, and the street price is well below $400, making it competitive, no pun intended, with most other mid-range options and well below the top end of what's out there. Blissfully blitzing basics, we have a 7075 aluminum shell holding our 1.1 inch by 0.9 inch window, which yes is bigger than some big windowed rifle dots. In terms of controls, we have two small buttons for cycling through 6 daylight settings and 2 night vision settings. The buttons are really small compared to the rest of the body and smaller than the ones on my EPS carry. They are fine, but definitely not the nicest out there. On the right side of the body, we have our 1632 battery tray, which is still rated for 50,000 hours of battery life, though that's really only realistic with the auto on and off functionality built into the optic. The turrets are very small and you need a very small flathead screwdriver to adjust. The clicks are tactile enough, and they're again set and forget. Now, the reason you're going to buy this thing isn't for the turrets or the buttons, it's about the big window. The glass is relatively tint-free and relatively flat. There is still some noticeable blue notch filter present, and a little bit of warp is noticeable if you are staring at the glass as you move the dot in front of your face. That stuff doesn't matter too much when you're shooting at speed, but just making a note of it. Now, one of the more silly things on the 507 comp is the reticle system. They call it their competition reticle system, or CRS, even though for a pistol competition you're only going to be using one of those settings. The basic setting that I use 99% of the time was the standard 2 MOA dot. The other 1% of the time was the 2 MOA dot and 8 MOA outer circle. For those of you who like really big dots, I guess that would work as a analog. Now, you also have options for a 20 MOA outer circle, and maybe that could be used as a shotgun pattern reference at a certain distance. I personally wouldn't use that one. And the final setting is a 32 MOA outer circle. And again, there are some distances you could use that on a rifle to give you a holdover reference at 10 or 15 yards, but if I'm running a rifle, I'm probably running a different dot anyways. Now, also of note is that you can turn off the center dot with all of those medium to large size circle options, which again isn't really applicable for the intended purpose of this dot outside of some very, very niche scenarios. So the selling point of the dot is really the big window, feature set, and quality at that mid-range price tag. So what is the point of that big window? In general, there are basically two things that gives you a slight advantage in. Bigger windows are a tiny bit more forgiving in terms of getting that dot into the window. Now, the real-world difference is not that much. For instance, on my EPS carry, you really only have a couple degrees of margin of error before the dot is no longer in the window. With the huge window on the 507 comp, maybe you have 2.5 or 3 degrees margin of error. It's just a little bit more forgiving. Sometimes you will notice that if you get a bad draw or your presentation is just slightly off, the bigger window will give you a little bit more room for error. Is it really that big of a deal? No, personally, I can shoot a K-size dot about 99% the same as a big window dot. It's just in a couple scenarios where that big window helps out. But again, for the competition shooter, when you're trying to win, you're going to take every slight edge you can get. The second benefit, at least to me, and this is just a preference thing, is that the big windows are less obstructive. The hole to window ratio is much lower, so I feel like there's a lot less obstruction in my vision. One tiny area where this can help is very, very small target transitions, where the hole of a smaller dot is actually partially blocking where you want to look on the next target, whereas the larger window is again just a little more forgiving. Other than those two small niceties, it's really just another dot with an emphasis on competition with some silly reticle options. Now, I recently got the opportunity to actually use a couple of these 507 comps in a class with Ben Steger and Matt Pranka. I got to use both mine and Ben's Ronin Tactics version with the dragon logo and green dot. Both worked great. I don't have an issue with the performance of the dots. The one issue I did have on my RMR cut slide is that there's no recoil bosses, so the short screw on the right side tends to walk out even with Loctite, but that's not the fault of the optic, that's just a me problem. Now, also keep this in mind if you were going to use this as a duty style dot or put it on top of a rifle. While that big window is nice, A downside is that it's probably a little bit more fragile if you just wanted to destroy the thing. I feel like it would break a little sooner than some of the other options on the market, but again, it's literally in the name. It has a dedicated application, and that is competition. So I don't think the slight durability decrease is an issue for its target audience.
Okay, so let's try that again, shall we?
Now for competition, if I was setting up another gun, assuming that it is RMR patterned, I would basically only buy the 507 comp. I don't see a reason to spend more on the other big windowed dots from the big players in the industry, and cheaper options from less reputable companies aren't worth the savings to me for this specific application. The one area where I think it has good competition is actually the Vortex Defender XL, though that is a Delta Point Pro footprint, so slightly different, and the guns you're going to be putting them on are, again, going to be a little different. Holosun at this point has a good track record for pistol dots. For most people in most applications, they either have a dot that is best in class, best in price, or a mix of the two. As I mentioned earlier, there are some really cheap big windowed options out there from smaller companies like Siley, Gideon, and a host of others. Time will tell on those to see if they hold up over time, and the other thing that might need to see if it holds up over time is the price, with the small tariffs that have already been implemented, so we could see a bump across the board from Chinesium imports. Now, in a weird turn of events, maybe the new Primary Arms Made in America HTX-1 will actually be the new budget option on the market. What a strange timeline. Anyways, this is going to be my new competition dot for 2025, and we will see how it holds up. But I am actually looking for something new to put it on for carry optics, so let me know what you want to see me run. But with all that out of the way, gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.